Hello, Internet. Ed from Iridium Solutions and the Iridium Group up here in cold Canada. British Columbia, northern BC to be precise. And today I want to do a quick let's talk with you, and I want to chat about direct pressure. If you've been sort of formally or currently trained as an occupational first aid attendant, so level 2, level 3 in Canada, or just inside the sort of standard Red Cross, St. John ambulance first aid paradigm, you will have heard about direct pressure for stopping massive bleeding. They aren't to the point where they're using tourniquets really yet, and when they do, the current verbiage in their manuals says if direct pressure fails, use a tourniquet. If you've been following along with trauma medicine, what we've been doing, or what some of the other people in the field or in the realm are doing for some time, you already have heard that we need to stop that bleeding within the first 4 minutes. We need to control that as fast as possible. Keeping as much of the casualty's blood inside their body is the biggest thing that we can do pre-hospital to improve their ultimate outcome. And so trauma medicine is kind of at a divergence with traditional first aid on that point, because from my point of view, if you spend a bunch of time trying to put direct pressure or pack a wound on top of it with pressure down to control bleeding, only to find that bleeding not being controlled, that's time you've wasted when you could have effectively controlled that bleeding with a tourniquet, and then all that blood that's now outside their body could be inside their body, keeping them alive. So that being said, direct pressure, and by direct pressure that means 2 hands, white knuckle pressure directly down on the limb will stop bleeding. Okay, direct pressure, squeezing as hard as you can, will control bleeding. So they're not wrong about that. But we talk about tactical problems, and tactical doesn't just mean shooting and fighting. Okay. Tactical means we have a goal to accomplish with limited resources. And certainly, if you grab something, anything right now, and squeeze with white knuckle pressure into it for as long as you can and time yourself, you're gonna find out that you've got an expiration date on that white knuckle pressure, how long you can generate it. And it's probably gonna be longer than it takes to get that casualty to a higher level of care, okay? So what I'm saying is, you cannot hold white knuckle pressure on that wound to keep it from bleeding, arterial blood from squirting out, reducing the casualty's chances for ultimate life over death, long enough to get them to an ambulance. It'll work in a pinch. You can kneel on it, create pressure. You can put white knuckle pressure down. It takes a lot of pressure. It's going to take a lot of energy from you, and further complicated by the fact that wherever you found them is almost certainly going to be at the point where they were injured. It's dangerous there because somebody just got a traumatic injury. That means you're going to move them. That's going to happen. There's never been a trauma case where that casualty never got moved. They're always going to get moved eventually. And so if you're just pre-gaming this forward and say, well, I'm just going to use direct pressure, I don't trust tourniquets. Okay, so you're going to get direct pressure, you're going to control that bleeding limb. How are you going to move them? I mean, you're out of the fight, you're doing this. And if you've got other people to pick that person up and you've got pressure, now you're crab walking, trying to hold that direct pressure on that limb. You can see how this isn't a very realistic thing. All right, so direct pressure is an effective, viable tool, assuming that your casualty is stabilized or in a place that they don't need to be moved, and or it's not a life-threatening wound. Direct pressure works. What works better for everything else and for our people? I mean, my 7-year-old can apply this and spin this windlass enough to occlude a wound. So all age ranges of the population, well, not all, but much higher. My 7-year-old certainly cannot produce enough direct pressure on my arm to occlude blood flow. Absolutely not. But he can use this. This is more useful. This is more widely useful. This requires less training. This requires less effort. This allows you to move your casualty afterwards, and all you have to do is reassess that the tourniquet is still functioning. And if the tourniquet ceases to function and you don't have another tourniquet and you can't improvise a tourniquet, after some time, you still have direct pressure in your back pocket as your secondary way to control the bleeding. If the tourniquet's only controlling it 70%, and it's the best you can get, throw direct pressure on there to get that last 30%, and maybe you're good to go. Pressure dressings, the modern ones are designed to create direct pressure over top of the wound to give some compression. It's not the same. It'll never be the same, okay? Wound packing, that means an open wound, taking gauze and stuffing it in there to the point of bleeding and then pushing down really hard can create that direct pressure if you have the time. If you're gonna wound pack, you've probably already moved your casualty or already put a tourniquet on, or it wasn't a life-threatening wound. Otherwise, you're gonna run into some problems. We will teach you where and when to use direct pressure, where and when to use wound packing, of course, where and when to use a tourniquet when you come to class. The class is Control Massive Bleeding. It's the Iridium Solutions Civilian Introduction to Tactical Emergency Casualty Care. We put these on in Prince George, British Columbia, but if you have a group of friends and get them together, we'll come to you and train you. Email info@iridiumsolutions.ca for that. So quick recap, direct pressure works, but in a tactical setting, for a trauma casualty, direct pressure is second or third down. Okay? In traditional first aid, they think it's number one. We disagree. This is number one. Everything else is secondary to that. Okay? So there's a divergence. I don't mean to offend any of the OFA level 3s that are watching this. Okay? However, if I did, you might want to consider that some of the training you're using is based on old situations or different situations than trauma medicine. I think there's a place for first aid and trauma medicine to sort of coexist, have overlaps, but have different problems that they address, and I think that's fine. Like in trauma medicine, we don't do a lot of CPR, right? We don't use automatic external defibrillators for cardiac events. In first aid, that's really heavy, and I think it's really valuable. And I think everyone could benefit from knowing CPR and AED type stuff. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, that's direct pressure. Hey, if you like this video, go ahead and share it with somebody. Hit that like button, which is somewhere. If you hated this video, share with a bunch of people. You know, it really helps to mess with the algorithm. I want to do shout outs. My brother, the Blue Line Syndicate group, is currently away, which is why you're seeing me filming this on an iPhone rather than his professional setup. But I really appreciate him. I appreciate him when he's here, and I really appreciate him when he's gone. If you haven't gone to the Blue Line Syndicate group on Instagram and subscribe to his page, do it now. Don't just stop this and go do that. It's worth it. He's an absolute professional at what he does. My friend John Willis, owner of SOE Tactical Gear, makes some of the most durable, badass gear on the planet. And he's one of the OG. So he's been doing this for more than 30 years. All the cool gear that you're seeing now, he had a hand in, way back in the day, back in the 90s. So, and he's got a story, and some people like him, some people don't like him. He's not my friend on the internet. We've met, I've been down to his place, we've hung out lots. We're friends in real life. I want to shout out my brothers at Refuge Training down in America. The best place for you to go, if you're an American watching this, is refugetraining.com, also refugemedical.com. Refuge Training has really great suite of responder classes. They call Responder 1, Responder 2, and Essential Responder. Very well done. They get really high marks from people who know what they're talking about. And then Refuge Medical has some of the best first aid kits currently available, really anywhere, that are being built right in America. And you might think they're my competition. I guess they might be, but I'm not trying to win the selling you tactical gear market. I could care less. If it were easy for me to build and market you an IFAC in Canada, I'd do it. The Health Canada has a bunch of firewalls in the way, red tape that make it a challenge. And so my goal is to get good quality gear in your hands. If that means you're going to go buy a pre-made IFAC that's got everything you need and nothing you don't from Refuge Medical, do it. Okay? You're probably not going to fly to America to go take one of their training classes. If you are, do it. But if you want someone who's local to you, this course, Control Massive Bleeding, has a lot less to do with guns and tactical movement and that, because civilians in Canada are a lot more restricted from doing that. And so this one, if you're a Canadian civilian, is probably more up your alley. But if you want to go down there, get after it. They're brothers. I think what they're doing is pretty amazing. I think this is what you need for up here. We'll leave it at that. We'll come back with another one. Thanks for sticking with me, and I hope to see you again. Snowbird.